Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben and with me is,
Jim.
or as I like to call him, crewman number 6.
I believe my name is Guy.
What's your last name? Do you have a last name?
I don't have a last name. Because this week, what did we watch, Ben?
We watched my pick, Galaxy Quest. And look, I'm still happy with my pick. It's not exactly how I remembered it, but we'll get into that. But first off, let's kick off with a synopsis. Galaxy Quest follows the washed-up cast of a once-beloved sci-fi TV show who find themselves thrust into a real intergalactic adventure. Tim Allen stars as Jason Nesmith, the egotistical actor who played our Captain Peter Quincy Taggart, alongside Sigourney Weaver as Gwen DeMarco, whose TV role was largely decorative, Alan Rickman as Alexander Dane, a classically trained actor who is bitter about his alien scientist character, Dr. Lazarus. Rounding out the cast are Tony Shalhoub as the unflappable Fred Kwan, Sam Rockwell as Guy Phlegman, panicky extra convinced he's going to die first, and Daryl Mitchell as Tommy Webber, the show's former child prodigy pilot. When a group of aliens called the Thermians mistake the TV series as real historical records, they abduct the actors, begging them to save their species from an evil warlord called Saris. Initially overwhelmed and out of their depth, the group fumble through alien technology and dangerous missions, but slowly begin to embrace their roles, not as actors, but as true heroes. Together they outwit Saris, save the Thermians, and return to Earth with a renewed purpose.
You did it. Well
I got
done
there.
on
Just
the
as a
synopsis.
small side note to anyone listening, I have had mouth surgery this week. So there might be a little fumbling here and there. I am trying my best.
Well, look, since let's get this last bit of talkie out of the way for you. Give us some facts about this film so that I can launch into what will be glittering praise of the movie.
I'm right there with you. It's just my memory was different, not my love of this film. Released in '99, directed by Dean Parasut, Red 2, Fun with Dick and Jane, and a movie we will be watching in the future, Bill and Ted Face the Music. Written by David Howard and Robert Gordon, starring, this is our longest starring we've had in a long while, Tim Allen, Sigourney Weaver, Alan Rickman, Tony Shalhoub, Sam Rockwell, and Daryl Mitchell. Now, Wikipedia did not include any of the aliens. That is a crime. I'm going to include the aliens. Not an alien, but a big part of this film, Justin Long. And then we have aliens, Missy Pyle, Enrico Colantoni, Jed Rees, and Rainn Wilson in his first theatrical role. A budget of $45 million, box office return $90.7 million. Jim, I think we know the answer. What'd you think of this film?
I love Galaxy Quest. I'm all in on Galaxy Quest. Look, Galaxy Quest is one of those movies that, you can watch it and love it and really enjoy it if you know nothing about Star Trek. But the more you know about Star Trek, the more layers this movie has, the more enjoyable it is, and the more you can really get out of it. If you then, combine that and say, okay, well, now I know a lot about Star Trek, but I also know a lot about being a fan of something, an internet fandom, then it exponentially grows, basically, your enjoyment of the film. So when I first saw this, back in, I don't think it was 99. I was struggling to remember. Obviously, we were quite young at that time, but I don't think I saw this in cinemas, but I did see it pretty soon after, on sort of, home movie, as we used to say, back in the day. So that was sort of my introduction to the movie. And at that time, I remember finding it funny. I remember really liking it. But I was a Star Wars kid growing up, and, this was the dawn of the internet. So I wasn't really hugely aware of things like fan conventions or whatever else. Much as I enjoyed it at the time and really liked it, over the years, as my love of cinema has grown, as I was introduced to Star Trek, as, the whole fandom thing became something that we really got into in the early 2000s, and fans started, joining one another and realizing that there's lots of us out there. that has basically just, my love for Galaxy Quest has just snowballed, to the point where these days when I watch it, it's end to end just smiles all round for me. What about you?
Huge fan of this. I think I've probably first watched it as like a TV movie. Ad breaks and all, probably recorded it, probably watched it again and again. And my journey is very similar to your own. Star Wars kid growing up, wasn't really a Star Trek person or watcher. I am now. And yeah, conventions were a foreign concept to me, other than knowing that Comic Con probably existed. Um, and then yeah, as you grow up, the layers kind of unravel. Like, first of all, funny movie. Cool, well done. Second, sci-fi. Awesome, I love sci-fi. Third, convention movie. That's cool. And then you've got this last kind of bit, which is like that kind of like realism, making a TV show kind of production
It's
side
the
of things of
show within a
fame.
show, or the movie
Yeah,
within a movie thing.
and you could have made a movie about just one of those things, and it could have just been about a crew who were once on a TV show doing conventions. It could have been just about a crew that was taken to space, but they gave fairly equal time to most of the themes in this film, and it didn't really hurt because of it. And it hurts even less when you do know the other topics quite well, because your brain can fill in the gaps, especially like the Star Trek sci-fi stuff, like, because they skip through a bit of that once they get to the ship pretty quickly. But as I said, if you're slightly familiar with it, you fill in the gaps yourself, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's like, and even like, so this film obviously is, its linchpin, or the thing that it's all based around, is the Star Trek both lore as a series, and also the sort of real world fandom and journey of Star Trek as a franchise. So that's
And how
really what
fans
it.
treat that lore.
Absolutely. So it's how that's sort of what it all hinges around. While there's sort of general science fiction sort of satire and poking fun, it's really very dialed into to Star Trek. So, and that's the other cool thing about it, is it's not just one Trek series. Like, really, what they're going for here, there are characters that are, sort of sending up, or references to the original Star Trek cast and the original Star Trek series. And then there's also other characters that are direct references to Next Generation, which
Yeah.
was, only just sort of coming to its end. They were still doing the next gen movies at the time that Galaxy Quest sort of came out. So, and then you kind of add in like the other sort of meta level of the casting of particularly Tim Allen and Sigourney Weaver,
Yeah.
as the idea that Tim Allen, coming from TV at that time, being Tim the Toolman Taylor, and transitioning to sort of, more cinematic roles, and that idea that, he feels like he can be more, and that kind of thing. And then Sigourney Weaver, obviously coming from Alien, and having all of that sort of science fiction, royalty, if you like, to her, to sort of joining this movie. There's just so many kind of layers to it. It was also definitely my first introduction to Sam Rockwell. So it's like, first
Yeah.
introductions, it's Sam Rockwell, it's Rainn Wilson, it's Justin Long, right? All in sort of one movie. Now, I'm not saying it was, I think it actually was Justin Long's first movie as well. So it was, Rainn Wilson had done theater, I think, but this was his first movie. It was Justin Long's first movie. I don't think it was Sam Rockwell's first movie. It was definitely early. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
certainly for audiences, I felt like this is where we got introduced to those three. And Rainn Wilson's in it only a very little bit. So, but even so, like, the three of them, love them to bits. And it's super cool
But
seeing them,
I did have that
in this
moment of
one.
like, oh, it's Rainn Wilson. It's Rainn Wilson.
Yeah.
I see
And
you under
that's,
that wig.
and even like the little stuff that he is in, like, it's the scene where Tony Shalhoub is like, trying to explain that they've got like this beryllium sphere on the planet, and he turns around, he's like, right again, guys, group hug, bring it in. And I'm like, oh, that's so, it's so good. Like,
So there's there's a hidden movie in this movie. Are you aware what this movie was supposed to be?
no, hit me.
This movie supposedly was supposed to be R-rated originally.
Oh, sorry, I did know this. Yes.
And there are hints of it throughout this movie. And one of them is Tony Shalhoub's character, who seems like this guy who's kind of given up, is real casual, is real chill. It's because all throughout the movie he's meant to be getting high, but they've just cut those bits out of the movie, and you're left with the real calm. Come on, guys, let's get a hug. When he gets teleported, he's real chill. He's not surprised by anything.
Did not know that. I actually think this version works better,
So
where it's just not explained why
yeah,
he's so chilled. Like, and I think
and the
that's nice. But
other
that is an interesting fact.
and the other evidence of it is there was apparently a lot of cursing in the original script, which they cut a lot of it out. But a couple of times throughout the film, you can actually see the characters say a swear word, and it is dubbed over as a non-swear word. So the really easy one to spot is the chompers, when the things are coming together and they've got to dodge them, and Sigourney Weaver's character says, screw that. Well, she very clearly drops an F-bomb if you watch it back. And they just had to use that footage, so they kind of scrubbed it out and just put screw that in there instead. And I agree with you. I think this movie actually works a lot better at its current rating. I'm assuming it's a PG. I didn't even look.
It is for us, yeah.
Because the sincerity of this movie works a lot better at that rating than it would an R rating. And that's why I think this movie actually really works. A lot of it comes across, especially the alien characters and the convention goers, as quite sincere. Like, their characters aren't in on the joke. They're not part of the joke. They're not a joke. They're real. Especially the aliens, right? Like, they're these innocents who have found these historical documents and used their alien technology to build what they saw because they thought it was real. And all throughout it, even when it's revealed to them, they're kind of like, it's still real to them. The sincerity for them is still real, which is, I think, as I said, why something so ridiculous as this worked. If they played the aliens for straight laughs, it wouldn't have worked. It would be a clown show. But yeah.
The emotional arc, yeah, you're right, for the Thermians, is great, and it's the idea that when you get to the end of the film and they sort of have it revealed to them that it isn't real, and then they actually decide, well, actually the philosophies, the ideas behind what the show was are worth replicating for our society. And there's something really lovely about that. There's something really nice about that idea, so, and that the movie does this a lot, it does this where it gives you something that is sort of hokey and sort of science fiction, and it plays it both ways. It plays it for that hokey sci-fi thing, and then it also plays it in a completely dramatically realistic way, and there's a few different examples of that. I think the Thermians is definitely one. The other is the slogan, which on the one hand can seem really trite, the idea that the whole slogan of Galaxy Quest is never give up, never surrender, which sounds just so hokey. And then a few times it's sort of said in that way, in that sort of hokey way. And then as you get deeper into the movie, there are a few line deliveries of it where you go, actually, that's a really nice sentiment, that idea that we won't give up, we will continue to fight, And the second one that stands out to me that walks that line is the score, is the score. So the music in this movie, it's kind of incredible because they've written a theme for Galaxy Quest, and this theme has to do so much in the course of this single film. It's got to be played as a completely hokey sci-fi opening credits theme, from the 1980s, and it has to play as that, and we have to be kind of laughing at it for that.
Yeah.
And then later in the film, it has to be played as sort of, if you like, quote unquote, normal, non-diegetic film music, as the actual rousing score and the theme as the characters are doing stuff that is genuinely heroic. And it has to do both all the time. Like, and depending on the orchestration and how they're playing it and what's going on screen, it's got to work perfectly as either something completely silly and that we're sort of laughing at, or something that we're actually going, yeah, that's amazing. Let's get on board with these characters, So,
I mean, it's this really fine line that the music is a perfect example of, that the movie actually has to do something that most movies don't have to do. On one, it's got this line, and part of the movie's on one side of the line, part of the movie's on the other side of the line, and some of it's in the middle. And the way I was thinking about it in my head, it's that kind of 1980s, that direct to camera acting, that kind of
Mm.
like never give up, never surrender, was it's shouted at the screen. It's shouted to the audience, right? And then you've got the in-camera acting that we get in the second half of this film, which is we're seeing something happen. We're not we're seeing it as if it's happening in real life. Whereas the TV show, even, classic Trek, right? It was always like everyone knew it was a soundstage, like it was all this kind of thing like that. So it's like that to the camera versus in the camera. And this movie does a wonderful job of stepping back over that line multiple times for jokes when appropriate, for pathos when appropriate, and for just, great moments in the movie. And the music, I think you're right, or the score is a fantastic example of that. It has to be played multiple different ways, yet it's the same piece of music.
And the second one that strikes me, or another one that strikes me that I'm like, we could not do, I don't think a podcast without talking about this is, Alan Rickman's hatred of his character's sort of catchphrase, which is this ridiculous. I wish I'd written it
Wait,
down, but
I
I'm
got it,
pretty
I got
sure
it, I
it's.
got it, I got it. Ready?
Wait, wait. Before you say it, let me see how much of it I can remember
Yeah.
off the top of my head. Okay, by Grapthar's hammer, by the Sons of Warvan, you will be avenged. Is there more to it?
No, literally, you missed one word. Instead of you will, it's you
Oh,
shall. So by
oh,
Grabfather's hammer, by the Sons of Warvan, you shall be avenged.
and look,
You're
so
so
the,
close.
the start of the film, fans are quoting that to him and he hates it. He can't stand it. He won't say it. He hates this line because it's just ludicrous. And then obviously, one of the Thermians, dies, who has sort of this hero worship of Rickman's character. And Rickman
As the
flips it.
character dies, he literally says, I've always thought of you as a father figure to me,
I know, I
even though
know,
we've
I
never
know.
met before.
Yes, which honestly, if the Thermians weren't so innocent and naive, you'd never get away with that, like
No,
given the limited screen time that they've had. But then Rickman flips it and he does this really great dramatic line reading of this absolutely absurd line, and it plays so well. And I love that moment so much. I just think that it had to be fun to do, had to be kind of hard, to be honest. The line is absurd, and
yes.
he had to like actually deliver that and make that land, in
It's
a
almost
really
like a Whose
emotional.
Line Is It Anyway sketch. Like, say this seriously, say this wacky, say this whatever. And that they've had to do moments in film. I mean, sometimes the making of a film would actually make this easier depending on shooting order. Like if it was done in a way that allowed them to transition. I have no idea of the shooting order of this film. But yeah, otherwise it's a weird one. And look, there is, with that character specifically, Alan Rickman's Dr. Lazarus, he chose the role because, and Rickman's said this a few times for a few different films, he loves comedy. He enjoys doing comedy. He loved comedy. Passed away recently, but he loved it. I mean, he was in a Kevin Smith film, and he never felt like he got a lot of chances to do comedy because of his proper acting background and, his voice and his gravitas. So every time he got to do comedy, apparently he just reveled in it. Like he
Mm.
didn't care this was sci-fi. He just cared that it was comedy. But in saying that, there's a there's a thing that everybody accepts in this film to me that is insane, and it makes me giggle, and it's not even mentioned once. It's just a sight gag. He never once takes the makeup off.
No, yeah.
Like, he's wearing the makeup for the convention, like the alien head. He gets beamed up into space. Not once does he think to remove the thing he hates. He just accepts it and wears it the whole movie. It gets damaged and messed up, but he just wears it. And it's kind of like this really interesting sight into his character, in that he is a professional, even though he hates it. He follows it through. He stays kind of in the character because that's what he is meant to do. But I really liked his character. The other two characters I really, really liked uh, was Sam Rockwell's guy. Sam Rockwell's guy was pitch perfect. It could have been a bit more hammed up and it would have been really annoying. It could have been a bit quieter and you would have barely noticed him. But that whole of like, he's a red shirt. He
Yeah.
knows he's a red shirt. He's not meant to survive. He'd weaseled his way into this because he wanted his 10 seconds of fame again, because he was on the show back in the day.
All right. Give people who are not deep in Star Trek a 20-second what's a red shirt.
The idea of a red shirt is basically every time the main cast would go on to a planet for a mission, you have to take a couple of extras with you to kind of fill out that team. The red shirt was usually the guy that was taken along on the mission for story reasons to be killed, to
And
add
literally
danger to the
in,
mission.
I'll say in Star Trek, the
Yeah,
original
they wore red
series in
shirts.
particular, they literally wore red shirts. So they
Yeah,
had this color coding thing, which is kind of absurd and fun.
yeah.
But yes, it was always the red shirt guy who got taken out by the alien or shot or whatever,
And
you know?
his awareness of it, and even the other cast's awareness of it, they're like, no, no, you're not going to die. You have a last name. He's like, do I? Do I have a last name? I don't know. Like, he's melting down because he's in a situation in real life that he knows fictionally he's not meant to survive. And he gets his little kind of trophy moment at the end of the movie where um, this movie does something we've spoken about. And I don't know if this was even an idea back in 1999, really, but to reboot an IP. In universe they reboot the Galaxy Quest IP. I forget what the original show is called, and
It's just called Galaxy Quest. Yeah.
he gets a named character as a security chief, and his last name flashes up on the screen. You're like, oh, there's that catharsis moment. He gets a last name. And last but not least, Tony Shalhoub's character is just such a wonderful counterbalance to the rest of this story. Like, everyone else is being dragged along, he just goes along. And it's really interesting to see that different kind of thing until he actually has to do something, which is like beam up his captain. Um, he's just kind of chilling and living life and has given up and just going with the flow. And it's very funny.
Yeah, absolutely. I also, this is going to sound weird, but one of the things I appreciate about this movie is definitely its script. Now, in the modern filmmaking landscape, this is really rare, but this cast was attracted to this movie because of this script. The script was written, the script was fully formed, shock, horror, surprise, right? Prior to production actually beginning. And the script was really solid. Everything was there, which is not to take away from anything that happened during the production of the movie, but it is just to say that it was the strength of the material that attracted the team that then wanted to make this movie. And I think the other thing about this script is it's not, it doesn't overstay its welcome. This is not a long movie, right? This movie does what it is here to do. It's very efficient in terms of its storytelling. It gives you the laughs, it gives you the pathos, and then it gets out of there. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's funny, I think that's actually one of the reasons that this has sort of endured, because it's actually a really snappy time at the movies, and it's something that is actually quite tightly honed, and it works really very, very well. Like, there's not, the second act in particular, it's interesting actually, because the second act is not very long at all. Functionally, the second act of this movie, which in most movies the second act is the longest act of the film, second act is really mostly about the rock planet,
Yeah.
and meeting those little aliens, and it's the glimmers of the cast basically perhaps seeing that maybe they could do this thing while mostly failing at it, but we don't need too long there. We just need to get that built so that we can then have what is a fairly long third act and finale in order for everything to pay off. And I just think that ends up working really very well.
Yeah, it feels like episodes of a TV show more than the average movie, right? Like, it feels like a two-parter or a three-parter TV show of one of these type of serials. The other thing I wanted to mention is something I love about this film, and I've spoken about it in different other films, Groundhog Day and things like that. I love escapism in films. I love people kind of living a dream in a strange way. And this movie has that in it, in that there are these aliens. They get these documents and they're like, hey, these are historically correct. These people live a great life. Let's use our technology to build their technology and replicate it. Now, what I love about this is there are nerds, geeks, fans all over the world who have blueprints of their favorite starships, who have engineering models, have scale models of all their favorite things. And these guys built it, earnestly exactly built it. And one of the best examples of this is the self destruct. They go through all their things, they get to the big blue button and they press it, and the self destruct doesn't stop. But that's because the only time the aliens have seen the self destruct was in the movie, it was in the TV shows, and the self destruct always stopped at one. So they
Yeah.
built the self destruct when the button was pressed to stop at one. So they hit it when there's 20 seconds to go, and it keeps going because that's the only way they know that technology works, because that's the only way they've witnessed it. And it was this really fun moment of like, oh, they've done this exactly the same. Like there is no difference. If the thing was absurd, they built it absurd. Like it's this crazy thing that just that level of escapism, that level of kind of fandom of like, well, let's take it to the extreme. What if someone did build this stuff and didn't know it was fake? What would they have to follow? What would they have to agree with fictionally in real life? And I just those little moments make me kind of giddy.
Yeah, and that kind of speaks to, something else that happens in the finale of the movie, which is the fans save the day. It's the fans with all their insane knowledge of Galaxy Quest, the TV show, that actually sort of come to the rescue, get on the video call like we're doing now, and then they save the day. And that's like Justin Long's got these lines where it's like, I'm going to get Kyle on. He knows the tunnel system better than anybody. It's like he's pulling up schematics of the ship. It's awesome to actually see that, no, like legit, we need the fans to actually make this work. They are a vital component to actually saving the Thermian race and the galaxy, if you like. So that's a really fun conceit. And it also kind of speaks to that idea that they could have ended the movie when they, activate the Omega 13, defeat Saris, and say goodbye to the Thermians, but they don't. They pay off the idea that it is important to give the fans the best convention of their lives,
Yeah.
and actually have that final spaceship crashing into the convention hall and, basically kind of turning everything around. And I'm like, that's an awesome payoff to the first act, which again, I think a lot of movies wouldn't have done that, because it is kind of a second ending, but in this case, so earned, so needed, and really, really pays off.
A lot of movies would have treated this as let's try to get to space as fast as possible. The fans don't matter. The fans are a vehicle to explain our current situation. They're not a part of the story. And yeah, you're right. They do take great pains to make not only the fans a part of the story, a key solution to our own problem. Justin Long's character in this movie is not in it a lot, but it's classic. My favorite version of Justin Long, of kind of that kind of stuttery yet precise kind of unconfident young man, when he runs out to put the rubbish away, that's a laugh out loud moment for me because I forgot it happened. You just get this weird cutaway of him running to take the rubbish out because his mum doesn't understand that there's a captain in space who needs his help. And, it's just this wonderful moment. Like, my parents aren't that kind of not involved in my life, but I've definitely had those moments where my parents have looked at me and gone, oh, you've just said a lot of gibberish. Oh, okay, yeah, sure, no worries. Rock and roll. Go have a great day. Um, and I saw a clip of him explaining the character, and he was like, "Yeah, like I really, really thought about it. Like it's part Michael J. Fox. It's part like in Back to the Future. It's part Chris Farley in the kind of the swallowing of his words, and like it was weird to me that a lot of thought went into that character. When I look at that and think, oh, that's just Justin Long.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's because like that kind of role is definitely how we saw Justin Long for a fair while, in the early days of his career until he was able to sort of, I guess, get cast in some different things and do things and show range, I guess, is what you'd sort of say. So, but look, I love this movie. I think this movie's great. I think this movie only gets better with age, to be honest. The more fandom becomes something that sort of penetrates, through mainstream culture, the more that people understand about science fiction, the more Star Trek itself endures and gets rebooted and redone. I think Galaxy Quest is only increasing in its awesomeness functionally.
Yeah, the thing they based the parody off, all of it is still being iterated on. It's still
Mm.
developing. It's still becoming new things. And to a certain extent, because this was made, some of those things also have become more self-aware. Like New Trek, you've watched a bit of it. It is self-aware now, and sometimes that's a little bit annoying, but it's self-aware sometimes in a really, really good way of where it's like, hey, remember when old Captain did this? That's kind of because of these shows and shows like this. And before we kind of delve straight off the end here, I did want to give a special shout out to the actors who did play the Thermians. That's a really hard role to play because there is nothing in that role that is not absurd. But it is absurd played so straight. They're the straight men in this movie. Like, if you think that's so weird when they can't speak properly and they have all these ridiculous ideas, they're the kind of sad, horrible pathos of this movie. Like, they're the emotion. And doing that while in these types of characters, like, my hats are literally off to like Missy Pyle and Rico and Jed Reeves. Like, they had a really hard job and they nailed it in this movie.
It's also like that huge kind of performance like that. When the line delivery is the overstretched syllables, when they're doing this sort of stuff with their tongues and making noises, and when they're slapping their thighs, all of this kind of giant broad choices, it's either going to be one of two things: incredible or the worst part
Yeah.
of the movie. And I think it's got to be terrifying as an actor, when you're cast as one of those characters and told, do this, or it evolves, that we're going to do it like this. And then it's sort of like, yeah, but is that going to work? Like, and you would not know until it comes out. You would hope, you would
Yeah.
trust your instincts, you would, trust your director, you would, think, that this I think we're going to be okay. But still, it is one of those things where, like, it's just, is that going to work? That kind of giant broad performance that, and obviously it works perfectly in the end,
Yeah.
but I got to imagine that was nerve-wracking to actually do something of that, huge broad kind of performance. So the only other thing I wanted to touch on, and I don't know if you got more, but I wanted to touch on one last thing, which was this idea that this film was made in really early days of the internet. And it's funny because there's an aspect of fandom which has gone away now, but is still present in this movie because of the time it was made. And that is the idea that, and it's really through Alan Rickman's character in particular, but it's the idea that, actors would sometimes be kind of bordering on embarrassed to be in these kinds of productions, because there wasn't the awareness of exactly how many people loved it. And there was that idea that, you know, it's just for nerds, and is it weird, and is it like, I mean, look, I think it's okay as the actor, but I don't really know, am I going to get made fun of, am I going to lose work, am I going to, and there was sort of, people had these concerns about being in franchises like Star Trek, and then of course the internet comes along, and all of a sudden, people realize, oh, actually, this is just an insanely popular property. This is an insanely popular franchise. There are millions of fans out there. This is fine, but that wasn't something that all actors felt in, the sort of even 70s, 80s, and 90s. There were still those actors who were, they were grateful to be working. They were happy to do it, but they were also vaguely embarrassed by it and weren't sure if they were going to lose work or get made fun of,
Yeah, there was a much larger divide between even stage, TV, and then film. And I think that really only started dissolving to a certain extent when we were a few years into the streaming era. The streaming era is what really kind of punched those walls down. Like the classic example, I don't know if you're talking around it, is Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
Patrick Stewart was cast as Jean-Luc Picard in Next Generation, and his agent basically said, "Hey man, take it for the paycheck. It'll die in a year." And Patrick Stewart's like, "Oh, it's not my thing. I don't really want to do it. I'm a classically trained actor. This is not serious. This is not acting, blah, blah, blah." And he did the role anyway because he wanted the paycheck. He was a working actor. And then it landed. And then he had to keep doing it. And he even talks about in real life the adjustment he had to make of like he was standoffish with the crew to start with and the other actors, and he's like, well, this is now my life. And then he started to respect it, and obviously he saw that he was kind of being a bit silly about it, but that was because the whole industry looked at it that way. The whole, and especially sci-fi, like even adding sci-fi onto that. Sci-fi was where people went, their careers went to die. It's where they
Yeah.
made their last films because they wanted to use the last bit of name recognition they had in this cheap sci-fi. um, so like, yeah, even on top of that, from serious actor to TV to then sci-fi itself. And again, you're right. The internet has changed that. Fandom has changed that because, the actors can now see in real time responses to their work and the love that people have for it. And it is love. It is
Yeah.
pure, unadulterated love. And I know there's people who don't get that kind of fandom, or they might get it with like a singer or something like that. But like people live, breathe. I went to my local Comic Con recently, Supernova, and there are people dressing up and running up to each other, and they don't know each other just because they're dressed as their favorite characters and they share a thing in common, and they instantly have a connection because they love a property. And ultimately, we started off talking about it. That's what this thing is. This film shows that love. It shows that connection. It shows how people live it to this day. And I think the actors now know that as well.
Yeah. And I gotta say, look, it's the best ad for Star Trek you're ever gonna get. Every time I watch Galaxy Quest, including this time, the next thing I want to do is pop on some Star Trek, like pretty much instantly, because I'm like, yeah, let's go, let's watch some classic Trek. So, but it's a good time. Thanks so much for picking it. While I mentally prepare to tell you what we're gonna do next, why don't you actually tell the good people of the interwebs where they can find us if they would like to engage with us further?
Okay, the three main places you can see or listen to us are YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. To do that, just look up Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. You find us in all three places with those words. In all three of those places, we would really love it if you could subscribe or like or follow. Leave a comment. Tell us what you thought of Galaxy Quest. Tell us who you thought your favorite character was. Tell us what your favorite sci-fi TV show is. Also, in that, you have the opportunity to suggest movies to us. If you suggest a movie to us and it is not ridiculous or like crazy for some reason, we'll add it to the movie wheel of adventure, where basically if I can't think of a movie or Jim can't think of a movie, we spin the wheel and we watch one of your movies instead. We also have a social media presence. You can find us on TikTok at Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. We post reels and shorts there, or you can find us on Instagram at Jim_and_Ben. Same deal. Like, comment, subscribe, let us know what you think. Let us know what movies you'd like us to watch. And now, as I've been panicking because he said he needed to mentally prepare himself to release the next movie on us, Jim, what are we watching next week?
Well, I was reflecting on, what you chose and what it is. So part of me was saying, hey, I should take us to Star Trek next. And then I thought, no, that's too obvious. It's too obvious. And then I thought, Galaxy Quest is, widely regarded as perhaps the best sci-fi comedy of all time. And look, we can debate that. There are obviously people can yell at us in the comments and say that that is completely incorrect, but I'm just saying it's
Please
out
do.
there. It's an opinion, and I think That's pretty solid. It's a great film. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, what are the best things? What are the best of things? And I went, I am going to ask us to view what I have come to believe is the greatest action movie of all time. And that is a huge call. I know it's a huge call. I understand it's completely subjective. But for me, we're going to watch what I think is the greatest action movie of all time.
Can I can I slightly interrupt here?
Yeah.
I know your tastes. I know movies you've watched multiple times. We could be leading into a film franchise that I don't dislike, but I'm definitely not like in on. And I have a feeling we're about to watch, and this is a guess, a Mission Impossible film.
You are absolutely correct. We are going to watch Mission Impossible Fallout because,
Mission.
in my humble opinion, I think it's the greatest action movie of all time. Like, and it's a fairly recent film. I'm not going to say too much more about it
I
other
haven't
than,
seen a lot of. I've only seen maybe two Mission Impossible, three Mission Impossible movies. So there's a good chance I
yeah,
haven't seen this.
I hope so, but we'll see. I can't wait. I'm literally, raring to go to actually view this film and then talk about it. This one, I'm excited for this one, in the same way that I was excited for Galaxy Quest when you picked it, I am super excited for Mission Impossible Fallout. So, check it out. If you want to know where to
To
find
be
it,
fair, just quietly, you've actually got the title wrong. It's Mission colon Impossible Fallout. Just if we want to be accurate here.
are you sure the colons between Mission and Impossible?
I googled it.
All right. Well, look. However you, if you want to spell it long form like Ben did, then no problem. But for the rest of us, Mission Impossible Fallout, check it out. It's on Paramount Plus, or you can purchase it. Do yourself a favor and just purchase it. It's the best. And look, we will see you next time for more of Jim and Ben's movie adventures.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a good night and day or wherever you are. I'll stop talking.
Bye.